all Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
Looking for the perfect weekend getaway? Love Lansing like a local. And we promise, you'll love Lansing just as much as we do.
You're watching My Michigan TV.
It's time for Lehto Live. Join author, historian, radio host, and YouTube sensation Steve Lehto as he breaks down Michigan's top stories, talks with business leaders and professional experts, and checks out the variety of statewide festivals and events that Michigan has to offer. You're watching Lehto Live on My Michigan TV.
And welcome to My Michigan Television on a Thursday. It, of course, is the day after the storm. There was quite a bit of ice and freezing rain and other stuff falling from the sky yesterday and overnight. And a lot of people have lost power. They knew this was coming. Consumers warned us yesterday, as did Detroit Edison and, of course, National Weather Service. So I hope you're okay. I hope you've got power. I've already heard from two of my friends that they do not have power as of this morning. So right now it's 29 degrees outside. It's supposed to hit a high 44. So if it hits that, obviously a lot of this ice will melt, but the damage has been done. Now we're supposed to have decent weather through the weekend, for what that's worth. But then again, freezing rain on Monday. So winter might not have left just yet. But of course, the main problem is all the ice building up on power lines and trees. So a tree will get too much ice on it, a branch will break off and take out a power line. Or a lot of ice will build up on a power line, and the lines aren't designed to support that much weight. And ice can get very, very heavy. It's deceptive how little ice you'd think there is, yet how heavy it is when it's spread out across the length of the line between the poles. And it, of course, depends on how strong those lines are. How old are those lines? I may have mentioned about a year ago, half a year ago maybe, I woke up one morning and there's a bunch of power crews with those lift buckets working in my front yard. And I go, what are you guys doing? And they go, oh, have you noticed that? And the guy points up and there's a crossbar on the telephone pole that was all rotten. And the guy goes, if we don't replace that crossbar right there, he goes, that's going to fall down one of these days. And you don't want that happening. So I said, oh, no, I agree with you. Sorry to intrude. Get back to work. But right now, more than 600,000 people are without power after the storm dumped ice and snow on Michigan. I walked across my driveway this morning, and there's about, I'm guessing, a half an inch of something on my driveway. I don't know how to characterize it. It's white, it's packed down, it's crunchy, it's half snow, half ice. So Sonny Elliott would have had a name for that. It's nice. I don't know, but I tried shoveling it, and I couldn't break into it with a shovel without a ton of effort. I thought, well, you know, something, I'll let the temperature do its work. So Charles Ramirez and Mark Hicks wrote a big story about the weather for the Detroit News. Hundreds of thousands of Michigan residents are without power this morning after an ice and snowstorm moved through the state, which even at one point or another sparked thunder, okay? It downed thousands of ice-coated power lines and forced school districts to cancel classes for a second day. DTE had about 460,000 customers with no power as of 8:50 this morning. Most of those are in Wayne and Washtenaw counties. Consumers Energy, meanwhile, reported more than 199,000 customers affected by power outages as of 8 a.m. It's a large jump after ice and rain continued into the night. Many were clustered around Kalamazoo and Jackson. So it depends on which provider you have, but it appears to be centered Wayne, Washtenaw, and then the Kalamazoo and Jackson areas. For a lot of Metro Detroit, it's been several years since they've seen this type of icing of this magnitude, says a meteorologist with the National Weather Service station in White Lake Township. His name is Steve Considine. Meanwhile, Matt Paul, Executive Vice President of Distribution Operations at DTE Electric, which has 2.3 million customers in Southeast Michigan and the Thumb, said the storm knocked down more than 2,000 power lines across its service territory. 2,000 power lines. Now, they've got more than 1,800 crews in the field working to restore power. So it looks like they got the manpower to do it, but as always, it takes time. The storm created a significant amount of radial ice accumulation. We saw some up to 3/4 of an inch on our lines throughout Southeast Michigan, he said. That's a level we have not seen in nearly 50 years. So the ice quantity and the way it built up on things is something they have not seen since the 1970s. So that's quite a while. He added that 1/2 inch of radial ice on a single span of wire can add more than 1,000 pounds. 1,000 pounds. He says that's the equivalent of a baby grand piano. Now, I love it when they use something to illustrate and you go, wait, I don't know. I've never lifted a baby grand piano. I mean, I suppose it must weigh a lot, but I saw a reference in the news the other day to something falling out of the sky that was the size of 3 beer kegs. And somebody had apparently thought, well, that's how the audience will understand the size. It's 3 times the size of a beer keg. But here he says that again, 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch can add up, and 1/2 inch of radial ice on a single span of wire can add 1,000 pounds to that wire. So you imagine that there's a wire stretched between poles and they're like, hundreds of feet apart, and you try suspending 1,000-pound weight in the middle. I realize it's not exactly like that, but that's kind of the idea. He said, we know how frustrating and impactful it can be to be without power, but I want to assure all of our customers we're going to continue to work around the clock as quickly and as safely as we possibly can until each and every customer is restored. However, he said, because of the storm's size and the extent of damage it caused, the electric company has no estimated timeline for when repairs will be completed and service will be restored. So I did not ask either of my friends if they knew how long it would be, because they will often give you estimates. But if it's way out in the future, I think they give you hazier estimates, kind of like a magic 8 ball. And they might say it's going to be like, 8 to 12 hours or something. The storm resulted in the death of one firefighter in Western Michigan. This is very sad. The firefighter came in contact with a downed power line. He's a member of the Paw Paw Fire Department. The Van Buren County Sheriff's Office said deputies were called at about 5:45 to a location in the 42,000 block of 30th Street in Elmina Township to respond to the death. And Paw Paw is down here. It's not far from the area where I lived when I was living in Eau Claire, Michigan, kind of just north of Berrien Springs a bit. Paw Paw would be a little bit east of that. And of course, it's named after the Paw Paw fruit, which is something that grows in the area. But a firefighter who came into contact with a live power line has passed away. Officials said in a statement it was a tragic incident and no fault of the firefighter. They said that the fire department is asking for privacy at this time and will release more information at a later date. They also ask that you respect the family, friends, and fellow firefighters during this time while they're mourning the loss. Please keep all of them in your thoughts and prayers at the time. Thank you for respecting their wishes. And if you think about this, I mentioned yesterday that they tell people stay off the road. Don't go out. Stay home. Do whatever you can to not be on the road. Yet some people have to go someplace, okay? Let's suppose you're at work and you can't sleep there. You're gonna go, okay, I'm gonna get home. So you drive as carefully as you can home. But of course, things happen. It was pretty icy last night. Cars will end up in ditches. Cars will hit each other. Cars will hit things. And then people call the police. So now the police have got to go out. Or in the case of some kind of emergency, firefighters have got to go out, or EMS has got to go out, or somebody's got to go out and respond to something. And so they tell you that if you find a downed power line, get away from it, stay away from it, and notify the authorities. And so it appears that there's a downed power line, and a firefighter came in contact with it. And I don't want to speculate, but it doesn't take much of a stretch to understand that a first responder might be called to the scene where something is happening. And of course, unfortunately, we often hear about this, where someone comes in contact with a downed power line and they get killed. So the fire department of Paw Paw had a firefighter who passed away last night. So ice storms in southern Michigan are not uncommon and can happen 2 to 3 times in a decade. But the ongoing storm Wednesday night was impactful, according to the service's Considine. That's Steve Considine describing the weather. The outage numbers showed how large it was. Outages rose slowly at first and exploded to nearly 500,000 by 11:30 last night. The number rivaled another storm, this one led by winds in August when gusts topped 70 miles per hour, knocking out power to nearly 500,000 people. Trying to remember, I've lost power briefly a couple times in the last year or two. I think that might have been one of them. Our top priority is the safety of our customers and crews, and that is why we're continuing to closely track the storm as it moves through the state, said Norm Capella, one of Consumers Energy's officers in charge of the storm. Capella could be Finnish, K-A-P-A-L-A. It looks like it would rhyme with Rapala, R-A-P-A-L-A, which is, of course, the company that makes lures. We were prepared for the storm and will restore power as quickly and as safely as possible. As the weather worsens and temperatures drop overnight, we're grateful for the patience and understanding of our customers. And that, of course, is always the thing, is that when you lose power, is it going to be a short-term or a long-term loss? Because if it's just a couple hours, you can usually muscle that out. Now, there's some people who might not be able to. People who've got medical equipment in their house that's on power that they have to use that equipment. But on the other hand, if your refrigerator loses power for a couple hours, your food will survive. Okay. But what if your house has a sump pump and there's water in the ground and your sump starts filling and it doesn't have the power to empty itself out? Then you find yourself down in the basement with a bucket bailing because you don't want your basement to flood. And of course, I know people who've got those auxiliary generators. I haven't got one yet, but I'm seriously thinking about buying one, and then maybe even buying stock in one of the companies that makes them. Outages are spread throughout Metro Detroit, though concentrated in Wayne and Washtenaw counties. Outages were in Westland, where more than 11,000 people lost service. Livonia, where more than 17,000 customers lost power. And the Ypsilanti area, which has more than 10,000 customers, blacked out. Michigan State Police and the Michigan Department of Transportation, meanwhile, reported dozens of car crashes on area roads. There were 55 across the state police's 2nd district as of Thursday morning, which includes Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne counties. That's according to their public information officer. 55 crashes in that 3-county area during the storm. None were serious, and all of them were caused by bad driving behavior. For today, the danger is going to be down power lines and the wind. Tonight will be bad driving behaviors along with the refreeze. So people go out and they drive around in this weather. And many people, for instance, will mistakenly think, oh, my truck is 4-wheel drive. My SUV is 4-wheel drive. My vehicle will run great in this weather. Well, 4-wheel drive might give you better traction when it comes to like going and turning, not necessarily going to make your vehicle stop any faster. And by the way, it also won't make your vehicle disappear when someone else does something stupid. So I can imagine what roundabouts look like right now, with some people got 4-wheel drive, some people don't. And next thing you know, chaos. So like I said, 55 accidents in a tri-county area there. And they say most of them are caused by bad driving. And again, it's not these drivers would have been bad under normal conditions, but they're out there when they shouldn't be out there, or in these conditions are not driving appropriately. So we're going to continue talking about the storm and its impact on Michigan right after this on My Michigan Television. Welcome back to My Michigan Television. We're talking about the storm that hit yesterday. Funny thing is, I mentioned I was planning on going to a museum. I was going to go with my brother to the Stahl Museum in New Baltimore and take a look at their turbine car. And they've got a turbine car there. I've driven it. And I was going to go out there with my brother. And he wanted to go yesterday. And I was going to go yesterday afternoon. And I looked outside early afternoon and it was ugly. No one was on the road. So I called him and said, I can't go. And he said, why not? It's just raining here. I said, well, wherever you are, it's got different weather than what I've got where I am. And I don't know that I can get out of my area safely. And even if I do, I might not be able to get back in a couple hours from now. So I'm gonna call it. I'm not gonna go. And he said, well, I'm gonna go. And he actually went, but he was coming from a different direction than I was. And he got there and saw the car and did what he wanted to do, and then he left. So he wrote me back on a text later and said, hey, I'm home. I said, good for you. So ice totals hit 1/10 of an inch in White Lake, almost 2/10 in Garden City and Pontiac and Howell, 3/10 in St. Clair Shores, and 0.31 in Saline. Almost a third of an inch of ice in Saline. Areas north of Metro Detroit, meanwhile, get more snow than ice. As of Thursday morning, snowfall totals included 6.6 inches in Midland and 4.5 in Bay City. Those are the official numbers from the National Weather Service. The storm prompted dozens of school districts, government offices, and university campuses across Southeast Michigan to either cancel classes or shut down early. The Secretary of State also closed several branch offices, including Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties. Pontiac City Hall closed early Wednesday. I actually got a thing in the mail saying I needed to renew the sticker that goes on my canoe. I've actually got an MC number for my canoe because it has a motor on it, and you're supposed to do that. So it's about to expire, and I got the thing in the mail. So I thought, oh, yesterday I had nothing better to do. I'll log in and do this. And at the very top of the page, it goes, many of our offices are closed today. If you want to proceed online, thank you. But if you want to come to an office, you probably can't do it today. So that was on the internet as of yesterday. Many districts that canceled classes Wednesday before the storm even really hit include Anchor Bay, Armada, Avondale, Berkeley, Centerline, Clarkston, East Point, Fraser, Howell, Huron Valley, Lake Orion, Lakeshore, Lapeer, Oxford, Richmond, Roseville, Royal Oak, Troy, and Waterford Township. And for once, they put them in alphabetical order for me. Thank you very much. They also mentioned how I thought it was kind of strange that they canceled school before the storm hit. And when I was a kid, I don't think they canceled till the storm actually hit, but maybe my memory is faulty after all these years. The Michigan State Capitol is also closed today due to hazardous conditions. Oakland County said its offices would be open after they were shut down yesterday. Now, Detroit Metro Airport had 15 delays and 56 canceled flights as of this morning, according to FlightAware.com. Detroit Metro reported 0.36 inches of rain through the afternoon, but they were getting rain. It wasn't freezing. That's always the issue with airplanes. As you know, if you're flying in the wintertime, they de-ice the wings. They're very concerned about ice buildup on the wings. As always, we encourage travelers to check their flight status by contacting their airline online or by app before heading to the airport, says Wayne County Airport spokesperson Erica Donnerson. State officials also warned residents to brace for dangerous driving conditions, which could continue through today. And also, of course, power outages, which if you got one, you would know, okay? I mentioned before, if you've got a smartphone and you've lost power, go to the website for your power company and find out how to get on the list for updates, and they'll text you those. So we have enjoyed an unusually sunny February, says Colonel Joe Gasper of the Michigan State Police, but we're now reminded that it is still winter here in Michigan. With this potentially dangerous storm hitting across the state, we advise all Michiganders to take precautions and avoid non-essential travel when possible. Temperatures in Metro Detroit, meanwhile, could climb to 40 today, plummet to 26 overnight, and jump to 36 on Saturday, the Weather Service says. The warm-up will continue Sunday and Monday when the temps could hit 43, 44, maybe 45 degrees. So the weekend should be warm. All of the ice will melt by then. It's just a question of whether they'll have restored power to everyone by then. Average temperature in Detroit for this February is about 38 degrees. It's normally 32 and a half. So we're still 5.5, 6 degrees above normal for the average. So far this month, Detroit has seen about a half inch of snow. Average monthly snowfall in February for Detroit is 12 and a half inches. So Detroit is still off by about, 12 inches, average again. DTE Electric on Thursday said it cannot put a timetable on how long it will take to get thousands of these customers from Southeast Michigan back on the grid after the messy storm dumped the ice and the snow. The storm downed more than 2,000 power lines. And again, as I said earlier, and want to emphasize, this is a storm that you see about once every 50 years. I've not had a storm this bad in half of a century. During a press conference this morning, the utilities vice president said there was no estimated timeline for when repairs will be completed and service will be restored because of the extent of damage from the storm. So, if you live in Michigan or any of the Midwestern states, you know that storms come and go. And you occasionally get the one you remember for your lifetime, like the one I mentioned yesterday from 1978. That's one that everyone remembers if they were there. But other than that, there will be these big events that are often weather related like this. Remember when the power grid went down, though? Power grid went down for a couple of days in southeastern Michigan, 15, 20 years ago. That was a crazy one also. But here we're talking about an ice storm, and we do get ice storms. But the thing is, quite often the ice storms just hit slightly different areas. And so I remember in the past few years where there'll be an ice storm that hits like Ohio or New York, like Buffalo or someplace else. And one of the cool things about the power companies is they will see if they're going to be needed in their area with respect to their guys and gals, the actual service technicians. And it's not uncommon that like an ice storm will hit like Pennsylvania and knock out power in a 5-county area. And DTE and consumers and people from other states will actually go, if you need us, we'll come help you guys. Because when somebody like us gets hit and they've got crews down there that aren't scrambling, if they're available, they'll send them up also. So that's one of the interesting things I've always liked about the power company. Don't get me wrong. I have to cut checks to them every month. I do pay those online, I'll admit. I pay my power bills, and I've had squabbles with power companies before, and I've always been a little bothered by how they sometimes act like they don't have to follow the law because they're a monopoly. I understand all that. But you often hear these stories about where a part of the country loses power, and the power companies outside the area that are not the same power companies will lend their crews. I'm sure they get compensated for it, but the point is they make their crews available and send them up and do what they can. So it's kind of cool. They all get together like that. But so there are thousands of power lines down, hundreds of thousands of people without power. I know a couple. And sadly, one person has passed away as a result of this storm event that we had that started yesterday. And like I said, where I am, my driveway is covered with about half an inch of something that's frozen solid, but it's white. And I think there was snow and freezing rain and snow and freezing falling at the exact same time. That's all I can think, is that that's what happened, is that the stuff just kind of fell and formed like a layer like that and froze like that. And I can walk on top of it and I don't sink into it. But I took a shovel and I was like out there going, I might damage the shovel. So got to be careful about that. So if you're out there, be careful, do what you can. Meanwhile, I got to tell you that we've talked a little bit about that shooting that took place at Michigan State University a week ago, Monday night. 3 people killed, 5 injured. And the 3 who were killed were identified fairly quickly. But the wounded students in the hospital are in serious condition. And only a couple of them had been identified. And I have no problem with this. I'm not criticizing it. I'm simply explaining why we are discussing this right now. But a 3rd wounded student from MSU has now been identified, and his brother has started an online fundraiser. Hannah McKay writes this for the Detroit News. And remember, the school announced that they will cover the hospital bills for the people who got shot. But hospital bills are just one of the problems you're going to have when you get out of the hospital after spending a few weeks in there, depending on what you're in there for. So the brother of the MSU student critically wounded in the campus shooting last week has started a GoFundMe to support the family. His name is Nate Statley, MSU junior studying environmental biology and zoology, according to the fundraiser page, was one of 5 students wounded in the attacks last week. 3 more were fatally shot, and the last victim's funeral service concluded Tuesday. Josh Statley set up the GoFundMe page to support the entire family. He said that Nate has 2 older brothers and is the light of their family, always making people laugh. Doctors have informed us that his path to recovery will be a long and difficult one. We love him very much. We can feel him fighting hard to survive and come back to us. Statley has been in critical condition since the shooting happened, according to the fundraiser, which was posted yesterday morning and has raised over $100,000 as of today. The 5 wounded victims have been hospitalized at Sparrow Hospital in Lansing for over a week. 1 remains in critical condition, with 3 others in serious but stable, and the 5th in fair condition as of Wednesday. MSU announced Sunday it will pay for the medical expenses of all students injured in the shooting. Neither the hospital nor the university has identified any of the 5 wounded victims, but 2 others have been identified in GoFundMe fundraisers. So there's now 3 of them who are on GoFundMe raising money for the families. One of them is studying hospitality business, was shot twice during the attack, wounding her spleen, lungs, colon, stomach, and diaphragm, according to the fundraising note. A GoFundMe to support her and her family has raised over $460,000 as of Wednesday afternoon. The other student who was identified previously is an international student from China working toward a career in sports management. He was shot in the spine and is paralyzed from the chest down. That was how they described it in a GoFundMe set up to support his parents who had traveled to Michigan to be with their son. Statley, the most recent one identified, had recently earned his first internship at the Nature Preserve on Mackinac Island this summer. He has hobbies and interests, including science, skiing, fly fishing, video games, reading, and running. He is also a vice president of the MSU Shooting Sports Club, according to the student organization's website. Stanley grew up bird hunting and shooting skeet with his father and brother, and has a competitive spirit like no other, according to the club's website. In 2022, Stanley graduated magna cum laude from Heartland Consolidated Schools, where he was a student athlete and participated in multiple sports, according to the district. Nate was a kind young man and well-liked by staff and students. According to district spokesperson Chuck Hughes, the Heartland community stands with him and his family during this difficult time. Heartland, for those of you who don't know, is near the intersection of M59 and US 23, kind of between, like, I don't know, Flint and Ann Arbor. And I had a brother who lived there for a while. It's a neat little town. And because it's near that major intersection, it's easy to get to. But once you get off the freeway, if you go to where the little downtown area was of Heartland back in the old days, there's a bunch of neat little old buildings that were probably built in the 1800s. And you can see where the old intersection was of the two main streets. But over the years with those major freeways right there, 23 and 59, a lot is built up around that intersection. So now there's like a huge like Walmart and Meijer, big shopping complexes and stuff. But Heartland, the town, is actually just a little bit north of that, northeast that intersection. And the community, of course, is that big whole area. It's largely rural. And I remember when my brother lived out there, back when he and I were both running the marathons together, I would occasionally go out to his house. I'd drive out there. And then we would put on our running shoes and go for a run from there to Partialville and back. And we jokingly called that the Partialville half marathon because we measured it. Now it's about 13.1 miles. So I love that area. And it's just such a beautiful country type area with, I mean, there's paved roads there, but if you want to, you can find dirt roads too. And I remember we had the whole route out to the cider mill in Partialville and back. And we did it almost entirely on dirt roads. And at one point, we even ran through a piece of state land that had a white pine on it that was just giant. And so I love that area. So that's where he is from. And he is the third of the five to be identified by name so far. Other two have not been identified. And again, I've got no problem with them not identifying because, you know, families probably want privacy and so on. But with the modern internet the way it is and social media and so on, you have this opportunity to go on to GoFundMe if you want to and ask strangers if they'd be so kind as to chip in. And the money adds up pretty quickly. So I hope that if these other students are going to need the money, I hope that they can do the GoFundMes and still get the results that these people are getting, because unfortunately, sometimes people will be laser focused on one event in the news and something else will happen and like, oh, over here. And suddenly it's like, whatever happened to that? So that's always the concern. We're going to talk in just a second about how times have changed, but still there's a problem with the way tobacco is marketed to kids in Michigan. Right after this on My Michigan Television.
We've all been looking forward to a return to normalcy, especially when it involves a breath of fresh air, a dip in the water, the chance to explore, or just the opportunity to take a break and enjoy the view. Our time is now. Start making your plans now to visit Ludington at pureludington.com.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
The heart of winter. It beats inside you. It's that thing urging you outside when the forecast calls for snow. Some were born with it. For others, it was carved with care. But for all who take winter to heart, it's time. Feel the rhythm of the season and pursue your Pure in Pure, Michigan.
Don't miss out. Download the My Michigan TV mobile app to stay up to date with all of our programming.
Welcome back to My Michigan Television. Things have changed quite a bit over the years. When I was a little kid, I remember gas stations, for instance, having vending machines. You could walk in and buy cigarettes from a vending machine. Now, as you can imagine, no one checks your ID when you work a vending machine. And I remember kids smoking everywhere, adults and kids, such that the high school my brothers went to actually had an area where the students could smoke, regardless of age, on school property. And I know kids who went to the junior high, before they called it a middle school, junior high up the street from me, and they would all stand around and smoke before going to class, and they'd stand on the corner of the school property, and the school had basically let the kids know, you can't smoke in the building, but if you go stand right there, we'll let you smoke. And nobody did anything about it, but technically speaking, you're not supposed to smoke until you're an adult, in theory. But again, there was a time when that was socially acceptable. Now, over the years, that's changed. Vending machines disappeared. There was a huge pushback against public smoking, where they got rid of it at restaurants and other places, inside stores, on airplanes. And I mean, I remember going to restaurants when they were starting to transition over. Smoking or non-smoking? Non-smoking, please. They'd sit you right next to the smoking section. It's not like the smoke knew where it was supposed to go. So the number of people who smoke nowadays has dropped dramatically. Also, I suspect most public junior high schools no longer allow smoking on their premises openly during school. But Michigan's children remain the targets of big tobacco, and Michigan just got a really bad grade from an organization that looks at what the state's doing and how the situation is with respect to children being targeted for smoking. Because here's the thing, I've never met anybody who says, at 18, I woke up one morning and said, boy, I'll start smoking cigarettes. Most people who smoked, if you ask them, when did you start? They go, when I was like 8 or 12 or 14. I had never met anybody. Now, I know that I've made that statement during videos on YouTube, and I've had people email me or contact me and go, Steve, I started when I was 18 or 19. So I suppose that it has happened, but the vast majority of people who smoke started when they were younger, because when you're younger, you don't make such wise decisions, and you also think you're going to live forever, right? So when some uncool person tells you, hey, by the way, those cause cancer, oh, yeah, right. Square. So Jennifer Brooklyn wrote this article for the Free Press. A report card issued by the American Lung Association gave Michigan an F on 3 out of 5 metrics, measuring how well the state is doing to control tobacco use. The failing grades reflect what the national nonprofit considers abysmally low rates of funding for tobacco prevention and control programs and grossly inadequate cigarette taxes. It awarded Michigan's third F for the ongoing sale of flavored tobacco products, which anti-tobacco advocates and physicians say are specifically marketed to communities of color and children. It's alarming, said the founder and CEO of Making It Count Community Development and chairperson of the Detroit Wayne Oakland Tobacco-Free Kids Coalition. The tobacco industry has targeted African Americans deliberately for more than 60 years, and youth have become their new target. The Food and Drug Administration banned the use of flavorings in tobacco products in 2009, but they exempted menthol, the flavor of choice for 90% of Black smokers. The exemption was a result of massive tobacco industry lobbying efforts, according to the Anti-Smoking Truth Initiative. In 2019, the governor signed bills to ban the sale of e-cigarettes and other non-traditional nicotine products to minors. A few months later, she issued an emergency order, making Michigan the first state in the nation to ban the sale of flavored nicotine vaping products. But retailers filed a lawsuit, and a judge stopped that ban from going into effect. Today, nearly a quarter of Michigan high school students report using tobacco, most of it in the form of flavored e-cigarettes. Nationally, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that e-cigarettes have been the most popular tobacco product among youth for 9 years running. In Detroit, there's a tobacco retailer within 1,000 feet of every school, said Jones. The tobacco industry spends nearly $300 million in Michigan each year to keep people addicted and to attract new young customers. That's the irony of the tobacco industry, because their product kills their customers. So what happens? If you're successful and you make your consumers sick, you got to get new consumers. Well, where are you going to get them from? Oh, there's new ones being born every day. Just give them a little while to grow up to that age where you can reach them, and there you go. The cost of the addictions and public health costs and loss of life will only be amplified as these children age into tobacco-consuming kids and then adults. Healthcare costs for smoking-related illness in Michigan total around $4.5 billion in a year. Across the state, tobacco use hovered at around 1/3 of the population, and nearly half of Detroiters use some form. We're losing 45,000 Black lives each year, says Jones, whose father passed away in November from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and emphysema. How many more lives need to be lost for this to become an important issue to people? And there was another article, I don't remember if I read it on this show or if I did a video about it, but there was a pastor in Detroit who said that he was approached by a tobacco company, and they said, we will pay you $250,000 if you will come out and oppose the proposed ban on menthol cigarettes. And so what they wanted him to do was use his position in the community to come out and say, hey, I think that banning menthol products is bad. I think they're targeting us. I think, and he actually publicly said, no, I was offered the money and I turned it down. But when you see them offering these influencers $250,000 to come out against something like that, you realize like that's the extent they'll go to on something like this. The rate of Americans who smoke has been on a long downward trend for decades, but young people continue to experiment with tobacco and get hooked. Almost 90% of daily smokers first tried cigarettes before they turned 18. And 90% I think is actually low. I think it's got to be higher than that. Nicotine is so addictive that one doctor who practiced for years as an otolaryngologist before becoming a medical director for Oakland County's Health Division would see patients smoking through the holes in their necks following major surgery to remove their cancerous voice boxes. So we've all seen those ads and things that they put together, the public service announcements, where someone has had to have, because of cancer, a portion of their voice box removed. And they're often breathing from down here. And the doctor said he's actually remembers seeing people smoking through there because they can't give it up. To see tobacco products marketed to children and other vulnerable groups leaves the doctor profoundly bothered. Cotton candy cigars, really? I mean, they're just blatantly, overtly marketing to children, he said. Youths are not the only targets for big tobacco's marketing campaigns. Tobacco companies have used advertising and event sponsorship to get their goods into the heads and hands of vulnerable communities across the state and nation. Big tobacco has shifted their emphasis in their advertising to impoverished communities, Black and brown communities, lesbian and gay communities. For whatever reason, they've found a better customer than the average American. People who are under stress, the doctor says, whether from financial hardship or social marginalization or academic pressure, are more likely to turn to habits that provide a dopamine boost. Dr. Holtrup, a pediatrician and executive director of Kids Health Connections, sees the same linkage. We have a very traumatized population. We have folks who have dealt with structural racism and implicit bias, public policy that have been disadvantaged to family after family. And how do you deal with all of that? As overwhelming. And so one way of dealing with it is you kind of numb it with nicotine or you numb it with marijuana. With nicotine, the addiction takes over. And I'm not even going to get into that because while they were pushing so hard back on tobacco, they're legalizing marijuana. But my understanding is that the two are not as related as you'd think, despite the fact they're both smoked. So with nicotine, it's a much stronger addiction. When Holtrup asked pregnant patients in a drug treatment program what kept them from quitting smoking, they told her that nicotine is harder to stop than crack cocaine. And notice she's talking to pregnant women who are her patients, and she's asking them why they won't stop. And that means that these are women who are pregnant, who are smoking. And we now know, you can argue all you want about, well, remember those guys got before Congress and they all took an oath and said that there's no connection between cancer and tobacco. Pretty much we understand that they were all committing perjury when they lied about that. But it's even clearer that you probably shouldn't be smoking while you're pregnant. I mean, does anybody really doubt that? Because as you know, they always joke that you're eating for two. Yeah, you're also smoking for two. So, but I mean, they've linked all kinds of things to, smoking during pregnancy, like low birth weight, among other things. And it's kind of interesting because I actually know people, a very good friend of mine, who I was talking about this subject a while back, and she goes, I can show you a photograph of my mom, belly out to here, smoking. And that's me in the picture. And I'm like, okay, so you turned out okay. I mean, but that's how common it was back then. It was considered so completely normal. And I know people who get upset when you talk about the fact that there were lawsuits against tobacco companies, not the ones by the states, because those are easy to explain. The states filed the lawsuits to recover the money they spent for the medical care for people who were on cigarettes. But the people who sued tobacco companies said, I got hurt by these cigarettes. And I've had many people tell me, they go, Steve, if you're smoking a cigarette, it's bad for you. You can't sue the people who made the cigarette. You were the one who used it. You have to remember that there was a time, and it goes way back, but there was a time that when they advertised cigarettes, including on television, they would often say things like, these are good for you. Doctors recommend these cigarettes. They're that good for you. And they'll tell you things like, oh, smoking does things like it clears your sinuses. It sharpens your focus. It gives you energy. It helps you wake up. It's good for you. And I know people who didn't believe that. I go, just go on the internet and Google the images. Old cigarette ads touting health benefits. And they'll have a picture of a doctor literally wearing a lab coat, smoking a cigarette, going, I smoke these and I recommend them to my patients because they're good for you. You're like, what? And so you can't blame somebody who's being bombarded with ads claiming that they're good for you, using them for a couple decades, and over the course of those decades, 30 years later, 40 years later, they go, oh, I'm sorry, they're now bad for you. They're bad for you. And remember, these things are addictive. So if you hook somebody on them and they smoke them their entire life and then get sick after seeing those ads about how good they are for you, I don't blame them at all for filing lawsuits on that. So, hey, Jared found one. Smoke a fresh cigarette. Yeah, give your throat a vacation. And there you go. That guy's either a doctor or a weirdo because he's got that thing on his head, right? So thanks for putting that up, Jared. Jared's my producer. He's 3 steps ahead of me at all times. So there you go. But those old day ads, and by the way, you got to remember, if you watch TV like Lucille Ball, like I Love Lucy, or The Honeymooners, or shows of that era, characters are often smoking on TV. And we found out later that many cigarette companies were paying for cigarettes be smoked in front of a camera, product placement. But it was never disclosed that way. So people would go, oh, there's Sylvester Stallone in a movie, chain smoking. And he was paid to smoke in those movies. So that's what we would say is another story altogether. But here's the thing. That organization says Michigan gets an F, a failing grade. for what they've not done with respect to cigarettes being marketed to children and minorities, but they've got some suggestions for how the problem can be fixed. And we'll talk about that right after this on My Michigan Television.
Welcome to Mackinac Island.
We were just named the #1 island destination in the continental U.S. by Travel and Leisure magazine.
We are proud of our little slice of paradise.
And hope we have a chance to visit soon.
So hop on in and treat yourself
to fascinating history
delicious island traditions,
and an unforgettable nightlife.
We look forward to seeing you soon on Mackinac Island.
We are connected to our Lake Huron shoreline, all 93 miles of it. Hidden bays and marinas dot our shores. Points of entry to our world. Open waters and waves, alive with people at play. Inspiration floats on sparkling waves. We are in awe of its strength and in love with its allure. We nurture it, play in it, savor it. Huron County Waters.
Welcome back to My Michigan Television, talking about cigarettes in Michigan. And organization says that Michigan's not working hard enough to stop kids and minorities from having cigarettes pushed at them. But they point out that Michigan is not alone. Most of the country received an F on failure to control flavored tobacco products. Massachusetts is the only state to earn an A in that category. It prohibits all flavored tobacco products in nearly all locations. The American Lung Association pointed out that Michigan spends less than 4% of what the CDC suggests it should on tobacco control and prevention programs. It taxes cigarettes at $2 a pack, a rate that is 9 cents higher than the national average, but puts Michigan in a 5-way tie for 19th place. Nationally, estimated smoking-caused healthcare costs total $20 per pack. Michigan does not tax vapes or e-cigarettes at all. Maybe they should start. I know people who saw the rising prices of cigarettes over the years, especially the taxes, and started to panic. And I know somebody who would go on cruises quite often, and they had a parent who would call them and go, "Oh, you're going on a cruise? Can you get me some cigarettes?" Because you can buy them and bring in so many duty-free without all these taxes. But that's, to me, a desperation thing. It got the point. I know people who quit because they couldn't afford it. And now, I know some people would say, Steve, that's not fair of the government to force you to quit doing something by making it too expensive to do it. But you have to understand this is a very complex equation. As they point out, the people who continue smoking quite often end up with all kinds of health problems. And quite often those health problems are paid for by taxpayers. So, Jones says legislation that would ban flavored tobacco products should be a priority. Another reasonable suggestion, she believes, is requiring tobacco retailers to be licensed. You need a license to go fishing. You need a license to do hair. You need a license to sell food. But you're telling me that a product that is as deadly as tobacco and highly addictive, and you mean to tell me you don't need a license for it? Jones also wants Michigan to remove preemptive language from its tobacco laws to unchain the hands of local communities. A tactic of statewide preemption by the tobacco industry has made all but impossible for local governments to adopt tobacco controls that are more restrictive than the states. In Michigan, we have a lot of work to do, Jones said, and we're organizing to make sure that we're protecting youth and vulnerable populations from the tobacco industry target. So one of the things that I've always been most curious about is when I ask people, how old were you when you started smoking? 12, 13, whatever. Where'd you get the cigarettes? A gas station, party store, whatever. And that is one of the other problems. They do not enforce the laws that are on the books about selling cigarettes to minors or even minors smoking. And I remember there's a community in Oakland County a couple of years ago that decided to crack down on kids openly smoking when and where they shouldn't be. And so they went to a stretch of road. I can imagine the road right now, but the school is here and the gas station is here. And kids would walk over there on their lunch break, buy cigarettes, and fire one up on the walk back. And the police would wait until they got a whole bunch of them out there and just grab them all and start throwing tickets at them. And you get a ticket because you are underage smoking. Like if you're underage drinking, they ticket you, right? So it turns out they can give you a ticket for that. And they wrote a stack of tickets and they all went to court. And a judge actually looked at it and goes, this is stupid, just threw them all out. And it's like, well, wait. If there's the law on the books and the police take the time to write the tickets for the infractions, shouldn't the court, enforce that? Shouldn't they? Wouldn't you think? So that's another problem. And that's what I actually view as the biggest failure in the story, is that if we actually enforced the laws and said, oh, you got to be 18 to smoke, if we catch you smoking before 18, you're going to get in trouble. And if we catch the person who sold you the cigarettes underage, well, they'll get in trouble also. And so every now and then, somebody will get the motivation. I was going to say get a wild hair someplace, but I can't say that. They get the motivation to crack down on this. So what they'll do then is they'll go, okay, all these kids are going to this one gas station buying cigarettes. So what they do is they hire, figuratively speaking, an underage kid, one who doesn't look old, and have them walk in and buy cigarettes. As they walk out, the cops walk in and bust the guy who sold the cigarettes. And I've heard of them doing that once in a while, but not very often. And they really need to crack down on that because I just know it happens. I know it happens. So the interesting thing is that the gas station I worked at in high school, where I drove a tow truck, had a vending machine in it that sold cigarettes when I was a little kid. But by the time I was in high school and driving the tow truck, that vending machine had disappeared. And I don't remember what year it became illegal to have vending machines for cigarettes in Michigan. You'd still occasionally see them in bars, but they had to be inside the building past the point where your ID would be checked. So you couldn't put a vending machine of cigarettes like in the vestibule of a store or something. But in a bar where only people who are 21 or older were getting in anyways, obviously you could sell them in there by vending machine. But the vending machines all but disappeared by the time I was an adult in Michigan, at least the ones that were in public places. But I mean, I remember when I was a little kid walking by that gas station, going inside, buying candy from a vending machine. And I remember seeing the cigarette vending machine. And I believe at that time, packs are 25 cents a pack, which right now, the people who are spending $20 on a pack of cigarettes are fantasizing about the days when cigarettes were 25 cents a pack. But of course, gasoline is 25 cents a gallon too. So there you go. Kevin says, ride your Schwinn Stingray down to the Clark gas station with a doctor note from your mom. I've actually heard stories about kids whose mom or dad would send them to the store to get cigarettes and write out a little note and say, hey, Jimmy is picking up the cigarettes for me today. This is Jimmy's mom. Okay. And what's funny about that is technically that's illegal too. It doesn't matter who they're buying. Can you imagine? Hey, son, can you go up to the store and get me a gallon of Southern Comfort? I'll write you a note. They've actually had a situation where cigarettes were never taken seriously, at least not as seriously as they took alcohol, which, so pick your poison, I suppose. Got to say hi to Kevin, Wen, Mark. Thanks for checking in, my friends, for checking in on Facebook. I hope you guys all survived the ice apocalypse. That's going to wrap it for me today on a Thursday. I will see you tomorrow, as I always do, right here on My Michigan Television from 11 o'clock until 12. And I'm hoping I'll have power by then. I've got power now, but I'm saying I'm hoping I don't lose power. I still have power by then. So I guess that makes no sense. Sorry about that. I will talk to you tomorrow, Thursday. Today's Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. Hey, can we just chop all this up in editing? Oh, I'm sorry. This is live. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
The heart of winter. It beats inside you. It's that thing urging you outside when the forecast calls for snow. Some were born with it. For others, it was carved with care. But for all who take winter to heart, it's time. Feel the rhythm of the season and pursue your Pure in Pure, Michigan.
Don't miss out. Download the My Michigan TV mobile app to stay up to date with all our programming. Welcome back to My Michigan Television. I'm Steve Lehto. It's a Wednesday. We are under a winter storm warning or watch of some sort. Snow is coming down. It's not that bad just yet, at least what I've seen of it, but a lot of schools are closed and a lot of things are happening, a lot of traffic accidents up the roads. So if you're driving, be careful. But we're finally getting some winter here in Michigan, just in time for the Meyer State Games of Michigan. And last year, I spoke to people from the State Games of Michigan, and we talked about this. And this is a pretty cool thing to do. So joining me now is Eric